What's fascinating about you, Marty, is you've bounced back and forth from different colleges and filmmaking and teaching. How many semesters of college would you say you've taught all in all?
I've been a professor for about 14 semesters. Yeah, when I was at Quinnipiac University, I was there from 2005 to 2012. So yeah, I was a part of 12 semesters. I was part-time for 6 years, full-time for 1. I've worked another another 5 years as staff in educational contexts. So I've been around for about between 15 and 17 years, I'd say. I've been involved in education.
Quinnipiac's a beautiful school, by the way. Yeah, it's a gorgeous place.
It really is.
What would you say is the difference, or maybe there's not a difference, between the questions some of these students have regarding filmmaking, whether it's just for a hobby or a career?
Yeah, the questions are pretty consistent. Students, when they get involved in filmmaking, they have dreams of becoming the next Spielberg or the next, Night Shyamalan or whoever their favorite filmmaker is. But they don't know the steps that they need to take to get from wanting to be that to actually trying to be that. So I think a big part of film students now is just sort of helping them along the path of making things that are slightly bigger in scope and slightly better as they go along. Technically, those questions can run the gamut. There are some students who are wonderfully visually, but have trouble writing. Some students are great writers, but they don't understand pictures very well. I was actually like that when I started because I was a journalist before I got into filmmaking. It took a while for me to understand how to tell stories visually. So it's really, the technical questions are sort of not as important as it is helping them figure out how to get to where they want to be as a filmmaker. So like when I was at Chapman, for example, they had a really great process where when you're a sophomore, you make a 4 or 5 minute film. When you're a junior, you make a 7 to 8 minute film. When you're a senior, you make a 15-minute film. So that process sort of helps you expand the scope of what you're doing. And at every step, there's going to be a growing process because you're going to be dealing with things that you haven't dealt with before. So for the 3-minute film, if you've never made a film before, you might have questions about working with actors because you've never done that before. And then when you move into the 7 or 8 minute film, you might now have questions about working with union actors because you've never worked with SAG-AFTRA. And then when you get to the 15-minute film, well, I've never worked with a dog on set before, so how do I work with animals? So it's really just sort of helping the students understand what step in the process that they're at and helping them adjust to the new elements that they're working with at that stage. I think that's the biggest thing.
And speaking of new elements, you said off camera while we were setting up about how trends can take a while to seep into academia. Mm-hmm. And I found that fascinating, not knowing that world. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So a lot of the work that I've done in academia focuses around crowdfunding and audience building. Especially in the last few years, I've done more kind of lecturing on that. I lectured at the University Film and Video Association conference last year in New Mexico on crowdfunding to an audience of film professors, which was actually really cool. It usually takes, when there's a new sort of element of filmmaking, whether it's sound and film or whether it's digital filmmaking, or in my case, crowdfunding and audience development, it takes about 10 years from the beginning of the use of that concept to the point where the higher education community embraces it and starts to teach it. So this was something, I didn't realize this at first, but about 10 years ago when I was teaching at Quinnipiac, I was really trying to get them to embrace crowdfunding and use it as part of the curriculum for their film students. But it was met with resistance because none of the professors that were there had actually done it before. So they didn't understand what it was, and they didn't understand how it could benefit students and how it can empower them to make their own content. So fast forward 10 years, Kickstarter now, generates more revenue per year than the National Endowment for the Humanities. Now people get it. They get it now. So higher education people are now looking at crowdfunding. There's papers being written about it now. It's part of professors' paths to tenure, is them sort of publishing on this. So now that it's kind of seeping into the world of academia, it's now more accepted, and it's now being looked at as something that people want to teach because they understand it. So it takes a long time to get to that point. But now that it's here, I think film programs are starting to look at that, if not part of the curriculum, as something that they need to be introducing their students to. So like the schools I've worked at, it's very common for them to bring in folks from crowdfunding companies to do workshops. So that's a very common thing. All the big film schools are doing that now. So the next step would be, can you introduce that into the curriculum as a class that you need to take for a degree, so that when you come out, everyone understands the basics of this and everyone can do it. So we're getting close to that point now, which I think is really exciting.
Why do you think it takes so long for a concept to seep into academia? Do you think because it needs to be vetted? Because someone can see it on Twitter and a student and be like, oh, cool, and then they know about it. But why does it have to take so long to be vetted, sort of?
Well, I think generally, higher education is slow to change. And it's been like that for a long time. Anytime there's new technology, anytime there's new opinion on something, it takes a little while for it to sort of become common thought, I guess. Plus, a lot of the folks that work in higher education tend to be older, and crowdfunding is a technology that's primarily being used by younger folks. Not entirely, of course, but primarily it's younger people that are realizing that know the tools and that are able to use them a little more efficiently than folks that are new to them. So I think those are two of the main reasons. And it's not just crowdfunding, really. Anything that sort of comes up as a new alternative to things that folks have been teaching, I think will naturally be met with skepticism. So in terms of funding, the way Hollywood's been run for a long time is you write a script, you find financing for it, and then you shoot it. So the process of being able to say, okay, well, I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to go raise the money myself, and I'm going to use these tools on social media to do it on my own. That's a pretty big shift. And a lot of the professors that work at the major film schools, they're used to this older model, and some of them have trouble wrapping their head around it, with good reason, because their entire career was based on a prior model. So I think that skepticism, and I think that learning curve is part of what takes it that long for it to sort of become a baseline for higher ed.
Yeah, now they're talking about blockchain, and I'm having trouble. Crowdfunding, I can wrap my head around because I was part of a campaign, but blockchain, and then I'm like really feeling dated with that because I'm having to, I don't get it. I've got to figure out, so I can see why I don't feel like that removed from some of these generations, but then when I see something brand new that seems so foreign to me, I could see how people would be afraid of it.
Yeah, and I think if you're an effective educator, I think part of the process of getting to that acceptance is realizing that there's going to be things that come up that you don't know because there's other smart people in the world. And the hope is that if you're confident enough in your own abilities as an educator to say, okay, I don't get this, you have an opportunity to find people that are on the cutting edge of that stuff and bring them in to show you. I think the really great educators are the ones that realize that they don't know everything, which is really kind of a strange way to look at it. But like blockchain being a great example, if you were to bring in someone, who worked for Coinbase or something like that, like a crypto trading currency site or something, they could explain to your students, and by extension you, what blockchain is, how it can be applied to independent filmmaking, how it can be applied to financing, all these different things. I barely know anything about blockchain. I own a little bit of cryptocurrency. That's the only reason I even know what you're talking about. But I could see that as an opportunity to bring someone in and kind of talk about, what it is and how it can help you. Because I've been through that with crowdfunding, I understand that there's things I don't know. So the hope is, if you're a student, or if I'm a student, I hope I'm working with folks who know what they are talking about, but who also know that they don't know everything. I think that's the best educational experience that you can get, is if you have folks that are like that.